So we're talking about old solar versus new solar, right? Who are you? Why should we listen to you about solar?
My name's Dylan. I've been doing sales for the last 14 years, business development, entrepreneurship, um, specifically in the solar space for coming up. I'm starting my fifth year now. Been doing a little over 4 years. I My first three and a half, almost 4 years in this industry were with a smaller company, starting it from day one, from the ground up, being able to take it from zero to over $40 million. It's been a really interesting ride, and through that, being able to see the complexities of the industry, knowing the strengths of being with a small company and knowing the weaknesses of being with a small company. Everything has different strengths and weaknesses, and with that comes the programs that those companies are able to offer,
Right.
right? So I have the perspective of a brand new startup and being able to build it to a very respectable amount. $40 million is not
Right.
nothing to throw shade at. So being able to do a lot in the industry, and ultimately then realizing as things have changed in the economy, it's ultimately forced businesses to evolve, to
Right.
stretch, to change with it. And in that time period, I chose a different direction to go with a bigger company in the space. And the main reason for that was because of everything I knew going on within the industry. There was a lot of complexities as far as lenders and going into a recession. The products and services that were being offered in the realm of solar had completely changed
Right.
over the last year. So I've got a wide view on really what makes the most sense in the marketplace and who are the best companies to partner up with, whether it be small, medium, or large size companies.
So what is the difference? Because if I'm a homeowner and I'm just trying to make the decision if I'm going to go solar, all I know is the guy that knocked my door, right? I don't understand the complexities between big solar, small solar, the benefits of going with either choice, right? Can you just kind of give us an overview of how does the solar industry work from that perspective?
Yeah. So with a bigger company, you obviously have more bandwidth, you have more working capital, you have the ability to buy things more in bulk versus with a smaller company. Obviously, a lot of times you're living paycheck to paycheck. You're figuring out which levers you need to pull as you lay that foundational building phase, no matter what the small business is. And that really stretches people in solar because when you're choosing to be a vertically integrated, controlling the whole process from A to Z small business in the solar space, there's a lot of money that goes into that. And then you start looking at how the landscape has changed with lenders. A lot of these lenders are the things that are putting companies out of business, to be perfectly honest with you. And ultimately, the big dogs that partner with the lenders versus the small dogs that partner with the lenders, the priority spectrum of that scenario is very, very different. They're going to partner with the bigger companies and they're going to serve those companies more effectively because they control more of the business as a whole,
Right.
right?
So when you talk about big solar versus small solar, you also have the sales teams and then you have the installers.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, like, how does that dynamic work for somebody who doesn't understand or even know that there is a difference, right? Because then you also mentioned vertically integrated. So there's the two ways you can run your company, right? You're either going to do everything all in house, or you're going to just be a sales team and then have an installer, or you're just an installer, right? Kind of explain those three components.
Yeah, you can be a sales group that leverages multiple installers. You can be an installer that services multiple sales organizations and you just handle the construction side of it. You can be both the sales side of things and then passing it off to an in-house sales organization, or sorry, install organization that does everything from A to Z. We're not outsourcing, we're not putting random people on your roof, things like that. And ultimately, whether it be big or small, I think it's really important to work with a company that's not outsourcing the job. That's where a lot of the nightmares happen is you can have one company who sells you the job, but by the time the job is fully installed, it's switched hands to three, four, five different companies to get the job done. Versus when you're vertically integrated, you handle the sales side, and then the next step, whether it with site survey, engineering documents, permits, everything that's being done for the project is being done in-house. And that's the
Understood.
biggest difference is it's very a lot more quality control. In fact, that's one of the evolutions of the company that I'm now with today, Freedom Forever, is they used to let any sales organization sell through them and they would just do the installs.
Right.
And they became huge, but their reputation kind of suffered because they had no control over what sales was saying or doing. They were just installing the jobs.
Right.
Versus now they're realizing like, okay, we want to fix that reputation of what we've allowed to happen by having the wrong people representing the company who weren't in alignment with what they were after and the values behind it.
Right.
So they now have adjusted to anyone who does an install with them has to be vertically integrated. They have to go through compliance training. They have to be on the team to be able to have access to them as an installer. So since then, they've been rebranding over the last 12, 18, 24 months to bring everything in-house and bring themselves to a vertically integrated standpoint. That's why if you look at everything that's going on with reviews and just the evolution of them as a company, you really have to see who they are over the last 12 to 24 months because they've done a great job of rebranding themselves as the biggest company and #1 residential solar installer in the nation. But they used to have a bad reputation because of not being vertically integrated and not having the full control over the process. So it led to bad reviews and things like that.
Got it. So you want to be vertically integrated. That's how you have quality control. You want to be in a position to where the project is not switching hands a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to making the decision to go solar, there was one more thing I wanted to ask you about on that. Okay. So let's just go into it. So when it comes to making the decision to go solar, right?
You need to understand the old programs versus the new programs.
Right.
Right? When it comes to going solar, because a lot of people are going to learn about virtual power plants, for example, and they're going to be doing research off of just strictly solar from a loan-based perspective. A virtual power plant operated through a power purchasing agreement is very different than just standard solar being operated through a loan, debt, fees, all of the risks that goes into that, right? So those are something you definitely want to look into as you're making your decision. Do you want to have risk tethered to it and look at it as an investment that could go up or down? Or do you just want to get the benefits of solar without inheriting all of the risk?
So
that's the biggest difference.
This is what I was going to ask you. So I remember. So when it comes to making a decision to go solar, you talked about, the pros and cons from a company being vertically integrated versus not. But one of the things I also see that could be a potential problem is when you have these sales only organizations, right? They typically are just traveling from market to market and just making a sale. What is the difference between somebody who is just selling solar versus somebody who really is an expert, a sales consultant, right? They're a solar consultant, because there seems to be a lot of people, from my experience, that I run into who they have a solar deal that most likely made sense for the salesperson, but maybe wasn't the best for them in their situation as a homeowner. Talk to me about just that knowledge gap that can be there and how that can affect the customer.
Yeah, I think to take that and broaden that a little bit, I think we have to remember solar and being in that world of getting that product and service is not any different than any other industry that has people tethered to it. Whether that be insurance, whether that be real estate, we all know what it's like to have a good mechanic that you can count on.
Right.
That's going to happen in any industry, and solar is no different. There are people who look at this from a professional platform and they want to grow and they want to make it a career and they want to consult their clients and develop a referral base and know that they're doing right by the people that they're serving and the homeowners that they're helping. And then there's other people that don't care about any of that. They're just burning and turning for the summer. They're going to sell as many deals as they possibly can. And they want to sell as many deals for as high of a commission as they possibly can, right? And they're only looking at it from how much can they gain in a short period of time. Don't make a mistake. There's a lot of money in the solar space, and there's a lot that you can win being in this space. But when that's the sole motive, the byproduct of that is homeowners end up getting screwed over at the end of the day. And that's why we have a lot of sales organizations that are doing blitzes. Blitzes are a great part of the model in this world where you're going into a new territory and you're hitting doors for 2 weeks and then you never go back there, right? There's nothing wrong with that if that's done properly and you really have done your background research to understand the nuances of the marketplace to really make sure that you're checking your boxes to make sure that the homeowner's taken care of. A lot of times they go into a market with zero marketplace research. They sell it the same way that they sold it in their other markets, not knowing how this market actually operates. And ultimately, again, what happens is the customer, the homeowner, ends up getting screwed over. So knowing that you're working with a company that actually has the proper data, that has done their marketplace research, that has good book of business in that area. You can see one of the first things you should say is, let me see your install map. Let me see how many installs you guys have done in this area and how well you're actually taking care of your clients in this area. And not all companies can provide that, especially when they're only a sales-based organization that's just out there burning and turning from market to market.
For sure. So last question I was going to ask, and then I want to get into some other things, but this kind of flows right in what we're talking about. So I've heard and seen a lot of consolidation happening in the solar industry, and it seems to be a trickle down or a trickle up effect, right? Salespeople give homeowners bad deals then turn into bad situations for homeowners. Homeowners are then stuck left with an electricity bill and a solar bill, which is not what they were promised. Then some homeowners default on the loans. The defaulting on the loans makes solar loans more risky to investors when they trade debt. So then the companies that finance solar deals cannot get funding, right? And now that's a trickle down effect because solar companies that may owe $150,000 in commission from last month are not getting that funding for the deals that they sold, right? And now the cycle is complete. Those bad deals that were sold by salespeople are now resulting in a situation where salespeople are not getting paid. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good companies. From purely just a business transaction element of it, I'll use the last company I was with. They were really good when it came to loans. We never had any problems when we were selling loan-based products. We only had your standard operating problems and things that every company deals with to an extent, but it was never a problem of not being able to get paid on our jobs. That problem didn't happen until the marketplace shifted. And the marketplace has shifted from traditional solar where it's loans, debt, bank fees, a lot of risk that's being inherited. You maintain any of the repairs, all of the things that can go wrong with the system, it falls on you, just like owning a home versus renting a home. The marketplace has shifted over the last 12 to 18 months to power purchasing agreements. And the reason that it's becoming so much more risky for these smaller companies is because the lenders are partnering up with installers and they're taking full liability over these systems that are being placed on people's roofs. And they're saying, hey, if you'll find us good roofs to maximize and leverage and partner up with, if you can find homeowners that have good roofs for solar, we'll give them extreme benefit for allowing us to leverage their infrastructure and use their roof. We'll pay for all the equipment. But with them paying for all of the equipment, they have a lot more control over the money because they can keep moving the needle on you. They can say, you need to get this done, this done, and this done because they're paying for you to get it done as an installer. So the problem that ends up happening with, if you're a small company that doesn't have the coffers full and you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you're even living month to month, if you're in a position like that, you can't wait. You can only wait so long before you can't get paid.
Right.
So when you have glass on roofs for stuff that you've already paid for and you can't get paid on it for 2, 3, 4, 5 months at a time because they keep moving the needle on you, things keep changing, your project keeps getting rejected when you submit it to be approved for funding, and 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, you're still waiting to get paid on a job that's been installed for that long of a time period. Companies can't survive like that unless you're the bigger companies, which they're going to prioritize more when you're a multi-billion-dollar company and it takes 200 of those smaller companies to bring the same amount of business volume that you bring to them in 1 month. They're obviously going to prioritize you as the bigger company because they get more from you, and that's it's just business at the end of the day. And that's what's causing this mass consolidation, is that a lot of these lenders are being forced into a position because of how the funding works to choose the bigger companies, and it's causing these smaller companies to go out of business. And there's a lot of lenders that have created that type of a problem for smaller installers.
Consolidation, is that better for the homeowners? Is that better for the industry? Like, what's your opinion on that?
It depends on what market you're in, right? Because if you're still selling loans and you're in a market where it's all about loans, there's some good, healthy, smaller installers out there that do a really good job. When you're looking at it from the perspective of just a homeowner's perspective, though, when you have less companies that are flying by the seat of their pants that are out there just doing their own thing, and you have a more narrow framework, right? A more narrow path to choose from, it makes it easier to cross your T's and dot your I's. It makes it easier to do a consolidation on who you should go with, why you should go with them. So from a homeowner's perspective, I think it's better because there's going to be less risk with all of these fly by the seat of your pants solar companies.
Got it.
As far as like small business goes, I appreciate small business, but at the end of the day, the small businesses in the solar space are causing a lot more of the problems for
Understood.
homeowners because they just end up going out of business with the best of intentions. But if you're gone, how are you going to serve your clients?
Right.
You got to be with companies that are going to be around for the long haul, right? Again, I used to be on the polar opposite side of that, wanting to be with a small company until I took time to really educate myself on the industry from a bigger perspective. And I started looking at the strengths and weaknesses of smaller and bigger. And I decided to choose and partner up with a bigger company because of the nuances of the marketplace.
Got it. So let's set the stage, man. Why is solar even a thing? Why are people knocking doors? Why are these $1 billion and $100 million companies popping up in the solar space? We know solar has been around. It's more a thing in California. It's been there for a long time. But why do homeowners need to be aware of solar and what problems is solar solving?
Yeah. The main thing that people need to be aware of is understanding, again, like you're asking why solar makes sense. Why is it something that we need to have happen? And why is it progressing at such a rapid rate across the country, right? That's the big thing that we have to figure out. And it's simple. Our infrastructure, our electrical infrastructure, the utility grid across the country is 130 years old. Anything that's 130 years old is going to need an extreme amount of maintenance. So that's just step one is we have to upgrade the electrical infrastructure. And I'll compare it to computers. Look at where computers are 10, 15, 20 years ago with the dial-up days where you couldn't even be using your phone and be on the computer with the internet at the same time. That was when we were in high school still happening, right? Or maybe when I was in high school.
Say we had
When I was in high school, we still had flip phones, right? So
Just say it was in the early 2000s.
fair enough. But I walked that line where I've seen it on both sides. But I look at everything's upgrading with technology, right? Everything that we do, even look at the internet, click and order versus brick and mortar, right? Things are evolving with technology. Why would our electrical infrastructure be any different? We're getting away from fossil fuel infrastructure that's old and outdated, and we're upgrading it with renewable infrastructure, harnessing the sun, which is something that we can count on, right? Being able to harness the energy of the sun to aid in our electrical upgrades, right? It's a no-brainer knowing that we need to evolve from our current old infrastructure to new infrastructure, leveraging the 21st century is what it comes down to. So we need more homes that are producing their own energy as well as being able to store that energy. And that's why solar makes sense, because with everything going on electricity wise, we already have a supply and demand issue across the country where there's more energy needed than we have being produced. So we have to build that new infrastructure and we have to increase it at a rapid rate because of things like that create a supply and demand issue. We have a massive supply and demand issue that is being created by AI, data centers. I heard a stat recently that even some of the smaller data centers are the equivalent to 10 communities. And if you think about 10 communities in the state of Texas, that's a lot of energy that's going to be needed just for a data center, right? You got a data center, you got electric vehicles that are being produced and maintained at an all-time high, and they're only going to continue to grow year after year after year. It's being adopted at a very fast rate right now. Well, those all have to be charged on a nightly basis. That's going to put more stress on our utility grid. That's going to create more demand. And ultimately, the more that these things continue to take off, as far as even population increases and more people being born, right? Like all of those components there are putting more wear and tear on the electricity grid. Population, for example, in DFW was 6.4 million a year ago with 2023 census. In 2024, it was 8.4 million. So 2 million people moving to the DFW area puts 25% more pressure on the grid.
Right.
So we have to think about these things when we're making our decisions as far as like, what are we going to do with our electrical infrastructure?
So you said the reasons why solar is a thing. The grid is old, it's outdated. We have increased demand that's coming from EVs, data centers, AI, increased population, and also increased consumption per household, right? People have multiple TVs now, and everybody's got a smartphone and a tablet, and you've got central air in all of these homes. So these things are taxing on the grid.
Bitcoin, you got all kinds of coins that are being, people are mining those coins. If you're in the Northwest, you got different things that are being grown out there.
Yeah. So hey, I almost missed that one. So why should I care? If I'm a homeowner, why Why should I don't work for the utility company. How does that affect me? Why do I care?
Because do you like to get the benefits of what you're paying for?
Of course.
Right? This is a program with the virtual power plants that are now available, brand new to the marketplace in the United States. It's been adopted in other countries already. But this is the only program that I'm aware of that you can get the main benefit from and have independence from the grid. It's a program that directly impacts you in your home and gives you twice the amount of security that everybody else has. Not only are you still tethered into the grid, so you have backup storage and you have the ability to pull energy from the grid in case something's going wrong with your virtual power plant, but vice versa. If there's something going on with the grid, your virtual power plant that has panels that are producing power in live time, plus filling up your batteries, and then you can draw energy from those batteries at night when the power's out, you're going to get that benefit of a virtual power plant. You have that independence no matter which direction you look. So it just makes your home that much more stable and energy efficient and effective, regardless of what's going on with the world and the electricity grid. And the reason that's important is with a virtual power plant, you're not paying for anything other than the power that your system produces. It's something that you're going to do anyway, but you can gain the benefits of being able to produce all your power on site and store that power. So you're just getting greater benefit for something that you're already going to do. It helps you to hedge against inflation is another big reason. With solar, you get to hedge against inflation. Across the country, electricity rates are increasing at an all-time high. And ultimately, you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do about that? There's no other solution that I'm aware of that allows you to hedge against that type of inflation. Just in the DFW area alone, it's been the bills have doubled in the last 4, 5, 6 years. And we're anticipating, because of the infrastructure needs here in the DFW area, ERCOT has been quoted as saying that we're going to need double the electrical infrastructure by 2030. So in the next 5 years, we need double the infrastructure and power of what we're currently producing. And if we don't do something about that, we're going to be hurting, right? So like the need for power is at an all-time high. And who do you think they're going to have pay for that? So when I ask you about getting the best bang for your buck, you're going to be paying for these infrastructure upgrades anyway. You might as well pay for it in a manner where you're home and you get the most out of it, right? If you're going to pay for solar regardless, you're going to pay for solar farms. You're going to pay for all the infrastructure to be built as they continue to raise your rates. You can either be a part of the problem or the part of the solution is the way that it comes down to. If you want to be a part of the solution, you're going to gain the most by being able to qualify for a virtual power plant. If you want to pay for everything anyway and not hedge against inflation and continue to bank on the power company, then you're going to be faced with your bills doubling and tripling over the next 3, 4, 5 years because of all the stress that's on the grid. So you're going to get the most bang for your buck going and taking, because again, all you need to do is pay for your power. So I'd rather pay for my power in a more effective and efficient way that's going to give me the best security long term than to just pay for power and and then I'm at the expense of what all the investors and then people who manage the grid and all these people who are making these decisions that are going to continue to increase my bill. I'd rather not play that game and put myself in a more predictable situation.
Yeah, so here in Texas, we get blackouts, brownouts, right? You mentioned increased utilities, unpredictable, right? Unpredictable rate increases. Talk to me about just how transitioning my home from a fossil fuel power purchasing agreement to me having my renewable power purchasing agreement. How does that protect me from these things that affect other homeowners, right? A storm happens, there's an increased demand for heat, so more people are using heat. For me on the HVAC side, I think I just told you the other day, there was a HVAC manufacturer who had to shut down because they pulled too much energy from the grid. The utility company told them that they need to shut down until, it was until Friday, and that was a Tuesday. So that has a full cycle, awareness now for me
Yep.
is like, because people are pulling too much energy from the grid, because it's cold, people's heaters are breaking because the demand for heat is higher. But the company that makes the parts when people's heaters break has to be closed down because they use too much energy because the grid can't support it. So now you got to be cold longer. Let alone those people who have planned brownouts and rolling blackouts, right? Kind of just talk to me about that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that you know of companies that have had to shut down for 3, 4, 5 days or longer because they used too much energy and the grid couldn't sustain it, right?
Absolutely.
So that's wild that people have to shut down their place of economics right? They have to shut down the way that people feed their families because our utility grid can't handle that type of pressure being put on it. That simplifies one thing. We need to upgrade. We need new infrastructure. We need things to get better. And you can either be a part of that solution, or you can pay for it and not get rewarded in the same manner. Because either way, you're going to be a part of the solution.
Right.
Whether you're a part of it from gaining a virtual power plant at your home because you get selected for that program with no debt, no loan, no bank fees, no hidden fees, no paying for upgrades later on. If your home gets selected for it to be a virtual power plant, if you are a good fit and your roof were to qualify and you were to get selected, you're gonna get all of those benefits. You're gonna be able to gain all the benefits of solar with no loan, no debt, no bank fees, no hidden fees, no any upgrades that were to happen on your home. If your home were to get selected, you don't even pay for those. We would pay for that. An example of that is main panel upgrades are a huge part of solar. Sometimes people don't have enough capacity in their main panel to support solar. So we have to upgrade that. With traditional solar and getting a loan, you used to have to pay for that yourself. That would get built into your loan. We'd have to come back to your house and upsell you, and now you felt like you got bait and switched, right? Versus now with these new virtual power plants, we're going to upgrade that infrastructure for you. The reason we're going to do that is even if we need to upgrade some homeowners' infrastructure as far as their main panel goes, maybe a little bit of a roof issue, whatever the case may be, it's still cheaper. And that's one thing that people need to understand. It's still cheaper for these finance companies who are operating in this fashion. It's still cheaper for them to leverage existing infrastructure of a homeowner than it is to go build new infrastructure such as a solar farm.
Understood.
And that's ultimately what it comes down to. They're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. One of the things I get when I talk about this program all the time is it sounds too good to be true, because they're like, let me just run this back. They're like, you're saying all I'm doing is redirecting my bill. Back to your question is, it's a bill swap. So rather than having a traditional fossil fuel power purchasing agreement, and let's break that down real simple. Power purchasing agreement, I think, is the key thing people need to do. You're agreeing to pay for the power that a system produces. You're agreeing to pay for the power that your utility brings to your house. That dynamic doesn't change. You're still doing the same exact thing. We're just going to help you do it in a more effective and efficient way. So by taking the same money that you're already spending, our whole goal would be to take that bill that you're giving to your utility company. We're going to redirect that over to a solar payment. It's going to be the same bill. Hopefully we can get you 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50% cheaper. No promises on that, but hopefully we can get you a cheaper bill, locked in at a cheaper rate. We're going to give you a predictable escalator. So your bills are only going to go up on you at a predictable rate that's much slower than the rate of inflation. So you're going to be able to hedge against a lot of what's going on with the economic marketplace by going this direction. You're going to be protected against any future brownouts, surges, full-on power outages, anything that could go wrong with the grid. You're going to have backup batteries that are going to keep all of the essential loads on your home up and operational. And as little as partial home backup, as much as full home backup, depending on what your home were to qualify for. But it's better than being completely tethered to the grid where you have a higher bill, because we're going to save you money if you redirect over here. You're going to have a higher bill, and it's going to be susceptible to way more increase than anything that can happen redirecting your money to a solar investment.
A little bit of vocab. Power purchasing agreement is just the agreement you have set up. You're either going to buy your power from the utility company or you buy it from renewable energy, which also, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I don't think most people understand that the power that we're using right now to have these cameras going, the lights on in here, this beautiful fountain running behind me, that power was produced within the last 2 to 3 hours, right? Because I've had customers talk to me like, yeah, don't they have like storage and stuff for the power? Like, that's not how it works, right? Like, the power that you're consuming right now is created in real time. Is that how it works?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So when you have that system on your roof during the day, we get a lot of sun in Texas, and to a lot of the myths out there, even without direct sunlight, your system can still produce a lot of energy. You don't just need direct sunlight to be able to do that. But we do get a lot of direct sunlight. So during the day, it's going to be operating what we call live time. You're going to be it's going to take it directly from the sunlight to the panels through the inverters and ultimately producing energy in your home, right? Living in live time. And a lot of times you're going to have more energy being produced than you can actually use in that moment. in previous programs, before the virtual power plant program, you would feed that energy back to the grid. And now we have a thing called import export, which is also known as net metering, right? Net metering is something that's really important to the solar space, but it's also something that's being hedged against because it can be a problem for homeowners as well. And they're hedging against that with batteries. So during the day when your system's producing in live time, all of the excess energy is going to be fed to the batteries. And then in the evening time, you're first going to draw from the batteries rather than importing all of it to the grid. You're gonna export it to the grid, or sorry, to the batteries, and then import your energy back from the batteries every single night. And then if you still need more energy on top of that, then you still have access to the grid, right? So that's how a virtual power plant works, is it produces your power through the solar panels. You're able to store that power with the batteries, and you're able to use that battery as an import export for your system and to gain more efficiency. And you're also able to use that battery for backup power in the event of a storm, so that no matter what happens, your home is now energy independent. And energy independent is an important word. It doesn't mean that you are cut off from the grid, because we're not taking people off the grid, right, but we are giving them independence from any of the mismanagement of the grid. Anything that could go wrong with the grid, when you have a virtual power plant, you are protected against that. So let's say we had another 2021 storm, and let's say it happens every 3, 4, or 5 years. Let's say it happens every 6 or 7 years. I'd rather have that virtual power plant tethered to my home every 6 or 7 years than to go a week or 2 weeks without power like we've seen in 2021. Better to need it and not have it, or better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's just an extra layer of security, because you're going to pay for your power anyway. You might as well pay for it in a manner that makes the most sense. It's anyway money. And if I can get more for my money and pay a discounted rate because I'm bringing value, right? My home is bringing value to the grid, so I'm being rewarded. And that's what it's no different than any other form of success. If you want to have success, you got to bring value. The homeowners are being given an opportunity to bring value to the utility grid. If you'll use your home to bring value to the utility grid, then you'll get rewarded with upgraded infrastructure that gives you way more security than just being connected to the grid. You also still have the security of the grid if that makes you feel comfortable, but you also have security away from the grid as well. You have two forms of power. One's more beneficial than the other.
For sure. So virtual power plant, I produce and store the power that my home consumes on site. I draw from my batteries when I have the need to, which is when the sun goes down. I recharge those batteries when the sun comes up. If I produce more power, my batteries are full and I'm not consuming as much, I pump that back into the grid. Takes the stress off the grid. Tell me about inflation.
And now they're able to take that excess energy that you've pumped back to the grid. This is another component of where the power companies really endorse this as a solution, because now they can take your excess energy and deliver it directly to your neighbor. If they're going to bring that same energy that could be produced, because this equipment's already been paid for, and they can take this equipment that's producing this energy and storing this energy, they can take that to a solar farm that's 100, 200, 300 miles out of town, and then bring that in through old infrastructure with the power lines, and they lose a ton of it because of its inefficiencies. You're only going to get about half of that energy, from what I've learned, by the time it gets to your home. So you're going to have to produce twice as much going from the fields than being able to produce it on site. So when they can take that energy, it's way more efficient for them, and they're getting the best bang for their buck because they're able to just deliver it right next door rather than bringing it in from 200-300 miles away.
Makes sense to me. Couple more things that I want to get into, some of the objections, right? But talk to me about the Inflation Reduction Act and domestic content. I know that solar is being leveraged in a way to where there's different initiatives. There's one called the Reshoring Initiative, where the whole concept is to bring manufacturing back to America, right? But homeowners can benefit from some of the tax incentives, and you got, like I say, Inflation Reduction Act. This whole solar thing is actually a much bigger solution for the country, right? I mean, I know a lot of people are worried about the security of our electrical grids and things like that, but talk to me about some of the talk to me about those two things, right? Domestic content, the Inflation Reduction Act. How does that apply to the solar industry? And how does that affect the homeowner?
Yeah. The Inflation Reduction Act was written to help rewire America. That's the whole thesis behind the Inflation Reduction Act, is we need to rewire America. We need to upgrade the current electrical infrastructure that we have. And solar panels, wind, all of those things have been a huge component to being able to make that happen. And solar is being adopted at an all-time high right now. Solar and virtual power plants and batteries are being adopted across the nation to help lend this stress on the grid. And we're getting away from some of those other forms of renewable energy, but solar is here to stay. And you can maximize the Inflation Reduction Act by using domestic content. For those that are using domestic content, the lenders that are leveraging this law, the Inflation Reduction Act, they're able to use domestic content to get the best tax write-offs.
Break that down. So break down Inflation Reduction Act. What is that? How does that affect me as a homeowner?
So if you were to own your system and you were to go the route of traditional old solar, where you're going to inherit the risk, you're going to inherit the debt, you're going to finance your system, so on and so forth, then you would get access to a 30% tax credit from the federal government. You can take that money and invest it back into your system to keep it at a lower rate. One of the big issues we've had with old solar is customers were not being properly schooled up on what was going to happen with that tax credit. They thought they could do whatever they wanted with that tax credit, and then they went and invested it and did other things with it. And all of a sudden their bill shot up $150 to $200 a month more than what they were anticipating, because they thought they could keep the tax credit. And they weren't told that it's going to balloon up after 18 months if you don't use that tax credit to invest it back into the system, right? So that's something that turned people off, because a lot of people didn't have enough tax liability to leverage the tax credit to begin with, because that's really what the 30% tax credit is used from, is your tax liability. Let's say you had $10,000 for a write-off, you would have to have at least $10,000 in tax liability, meaning taxes that you paid to the federal government to get that compensated.
And
It could
most
roll
people
out.
get a check back for their taxes
Mhm.
and don't have any tax
Mhm.
liability.
Correct.
So that could be, I could see that being a big problem why homeowners are like, well, now I've still got this solar payment and it went up and I've got this electric bill. It just didn't work out for me. And then they can be one of those people that had a bad solar experience, right?
Mhm.
How does that tie into domestic content? Because if the homeowner is not getting the benefit, then is the solar installer, is the solar company getting that tax benefit? And does that bring margins down?
Mhm. So I'll use the company that I am aware of that's doing it the most effectively. It's a company called Infin, and to leverage and maximize the IRA, from what I've understood, is you have to have at least 85% of the material has to be domestic. And that's from the railing to the screws, anything that's being used on that project. 85% of the material that's being used on the project has to be domestic to get the most out of the IRA. That's how those two tether together, right? If you want to maximize the Inflation Reduction Act, you have to use 85% at least domestic content. The companies,
85% of the solar system has to be made in the US, manufactured.
and that's of all the nuts and bolts of the whole system. That's including the railing, the screws, the bolts, anything. 85% of it has to be domestic content, right? And if you do that, you can then get access. There's layers of write-offs and things that are available if you're leveraging the IRA at its fullest. And that's where it's like you see these companies like Infin who's saying, I'll come in and we'll take full liability of your system, knowing that they're going to be able to depreciate it. They're going to be able to get 40% in federal funding. Like, all of these things are going to be chopping away at that. Plus, they can become your utility company for the next 25 years. It's the upgrade of utility companies. They're going to redirect that money and become your utility company. And now they're looking for homes that make the most sense, right? That's the big upgrade in this, is they're saying, hey, I'm gonna take the Inflation Reduction Act and I'm gonna maximize that on my behalf.
Makes sense.
Or on the homeowner's behalf. So as a homeowner, when you're using a power purchasing agreement, you don't get access to those tax write-offs anymore. You also don't have the liability that you once had, because you're just paying for the power that system is producing. You're changing utility.
So if I make a lot of money, I have high tax liability, potentially financing the system could make sense for me. Or no matter what situation I'm in, a power purchasing agreement by going with a virtual power plant could be more beneficial, because I'm not assuming the liability, produce, store all my power needs right there on site. Talk to me about, and we're gonna fly through these last couple topics here. Talk to me about building a system, right? When you build a system, you want to build it off their exact usage, right? Or also projected increases in usage. Talk to me about how do you design a system?
Yeah. So when I'm designing a system for a homeowner, I need to know exactly what their usage was for the last 12 months minimum to the kilowatt hour. I want to know exactly what they use every single month for the last 12 months. Ideally, I can get 24 months so that we can have extra data to see exactly what their usage has been like over the last 24 months, what kind of habits they've created, and what kind of habits they know they're going to have in the future, whether that be a hot tub or a pool or an electric vehicle. We want to think about all of those things when we're designing a system. So, looking at the previous data as well as forecasting new data. Those are things that is my responsibility as a solar consultant and not just a stereotypical running and gunning salesperson, right? Back to your question from earlier. I want to consult them properly, and I can't do that unless I have the proper data. One of the big pain points of the industry is people who come in and they just use averages and they use random numbers and they're not actually making the system to the needs of the customer. I'm going to get a picture of your utility bill. I'm going to know exactly what you're paying per kilowatt hour right now out the gates. I'm going to know exactly how many kilowatt hours that you're using per year, 15, 20, 30,000, whatever it is. And then I'm going to design a system based off of those needs, your current needs. I'm also going to ask you, do you plan on changing anything over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? Because if you do, we can build that resource into your system now. So that way you'll be ready for it later. The most recent customer that I helped to go solar with a virtual power plant, they added an extra 8 panels onto their system because they are in the process of getting an electric vehicle and they're going to need to be charging that vehicle to do about 1,200 miles a year right now. Or sorry, 1,200 miles a month is what they're using that system for. I highly encourage people to think about that when they're looking at it. And then I'm going to go in there and I'm going to use the most effective and efficient parts of your roof. I'm not just going to max out your roof. A lot of solar sales people do that too, is anywhere they can put panels, they'll just put panels. There's times where I'll build a smaller system and I'll give somebody an 80% offset because their roof on the other side has shading or they have panels that are inefficient. If you're running into a situation where they're using north, south, west, and east, sometimes that does make sense in Texas because roofs make sense where you can still leverage the north side. But there's a 90% of the time where north side doesn't make sense because it gets the least amount of sun hours and it's not effective and efficient for the homeowner, but the sales reps benefit because they sold a bigger system. So I'm not looking to do that. I'm looking to build a system for you that's going to maximize your desires and give you the best bang for your buck. And I'm going to do it tailor-made to your guys' usage, tailor-made to your guys' lifestyle, tailor-made to everything you need as a homeowner.
So you're going to tailor make my solar system, and from there, how do I see if it works for me? You guys will design a proposal, kind of walk me through that process. We'll touch on some objections, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so I
Got
send
my utility bill.
I send the utility bill to my engineering. Then after doing that, we are able to see exactly how many panels you would need, what percentage of offset we would be able to get you. Sometimes it's 80, sometimes it's 90, sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 120, 30%, depending on what the homeowner's needs are. But we'll know exactly how many panels you need, exactly what percent offset you're going to have, exactly what your monthly payment would be, exactly how many batteries you would qualify for. We're going to be able to give you the specs as far as a proposal goes on what you can expect. Right?
Tell me what does offset mean?
Offset is the amount of energy that we can get from solar versus pulling from the utility grid. What percentage of your bill can be covered with solar? Because it's not always 100%. Sometimes people use a lot of energy and it's impossible because they use 40, 50,000 kilowatt hours because they're cranking with 2 or 3 or 4 ACs. They got a pool.
Is it still beneficial?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's still times I've sold people because I've sold people that are doing 60, 70, 80,000 kilowatt hours because they're just doing a lot in their house. They work from home. They've got all the glitz and glam. And I was only able to get them to a 20% offset and they were stoked about it. But that 20% offset was about 2 homes worth of energy in a normal case. Right. So it's all customizable to what's going on. Yeah. So yeah, something is better than nothing. Right. But it just depends on what these homeowners are dealing with.
Got it. So let's talk about some of the objections, right? You talked about reviews earlier, right? And why the installer Freedom Forever may have bad reviews in some instances in the past, but That was before they were vertically integrated with the salespeople telling them whatever, hey, I'm going to get you to 100% offset, and your solar system is going to be producing you money. You're actually going to be getting a check from the utility company, and that doesn't happen. Which, talk on this real quick. In Texas, we have retail energy providers, REPs, right? Somebody who has solar right now maybe is on the wrong REP. Explain that real quick.
There's 4 layers of utility in Texas. You have the Public Utilities Commissioner of Texas. You have ERCOT. You have whether it's a co-serve, something like co-serve that's a co-op, or whether you're in the deregulated portion of Texas, then you're going to have Encore, CenterPoint, Texas, New Mexico Power. Those portions of the grid throughout the state of Texas, they're going to have REPs, retail energy providers. So you got Public Utilities Commissioner of Texas, ERCOT, CenterPoint, Encore, Texas, New Mexico Power, one of those 3. Not all, you only be in one of them. And then the REPs, the retail energy providers, you can have up to 150 of them. And those are the ones that retail the power. Encore, CenterPoint, Texas, New Mexico Power, those are the people that deliver the power, right? When you need an REP, that's who's going to set you up with free nights and weekends. They're going to set you up with what your price per kilowatt hour is if you're drawing energy from the grid or giving it back to the grid. And there are some REPs that are very, very effective and that have the best bang for your buck when it comes to solar. And there's other ones that haven't really adapted with the times yet that aren't really offering the best solar programs. So you do have to make sure that you're tethered to the one that's going to be the most beneficial to your home and your needs. And you're again, when you're sitting down with someone who really understands the nuances of this industry and the marketplace, they're going to be able to consult you in what REPs are the best. I help my clients get connected to the same REP every single time, and have since we started doing solar, so that they could get the best bang for their buck, so that they could really optimize the efficiency of their system. I can't say they always listened, and they hit me up later, and then I'm like, hey, did you change REPs? And they're like, no, and then they do that, and it fixes the problem.
So sometimes people just might need to change their REP if they already have solar, and maybe they end up having both bills because they're not on the right plan.
And sometimes you might have 2 bills. It doesn't mean just because you go solar, it doesn't mean you're not going to have 2 bills. It's all based off the amount of kilowatt hours that are being needed. Sometimes people are told that they're not going to have a bill when the sales rep probably knew they were still going to have a bill. Honestly, I'd say 40% of my clients end up having 2 bills, and it's not that big of a deal because they're able to get the benefit of solar on 70, 80, 90% of their power, and then they still have to play with the grid on the other 10 to 20% of their power.
Understood.
And they're completely okay with that, because I'd rather have 70, 80% insurance versus no insurance, right? If I was going to get hurt and I had to go to the doctor and I had $1 million bill and I could get 70 to 80% of that covered versus only having to pay 10 to 20, I'm going to take that all day. And that's how I look at solar. Is it's an insurance policy against the economic marketplace. That's what solar is. That's what a virtual power plant is. It's security against all the nuances of the electrical grid and the economic marketplace and the people who run that, who are all about making money. And they're only going to make money by taking more money from the homeowners to pay for their needs. They're not going to give it from their pockets. That's why they're always profitable.
That brings a lot of clarity. But I'm about to move. Thinking about moving. We don't want to be tied down to any long-term agreements or have any issues trying to sell our home.
Yeah, so I know we're about to get into some of the frequently asked questions here, and that's where I also want to tether in, as you're doing research with some of these questions that people have. A great question. People are going to move. The stats are every 6-7 years, people are moving into their next home. So that's a very understandable thing to think about, right? But as people are doing research, is what I want to get people properly educated on. You got to do the research of what things are today versus what they were. The dynamics of the marketplace have changed, and the way that things used to work with the old solar programs versus the way that things work with the virtual power plant programs and today's programs are vastly different, right? And I'll give you an example. Moving is one of the greatest ones. When you were going to move before, when you were going to take out a loan, you were going to be in debt, you were going to have all the fees and all of the things that are associated with old solar programs. In that case, you would have to get whatever's left on the system. Let's say there was $50,000 left on the system. You would have to find a realtor that knew and understood solar, which if you don't have one, you should find one, because solar makes sense when you have the right people. Even if it's a loan, it still makes sense if you have the right people guiding you down that path. But you have to get that built into the sell of the home. So $50,000 so that you can pay off that remainder. Plus, you want to get a little bit of equity. So people are trying to sell that for 60, 70,000 to make up and be able to profit a little bit more from the solar system, right? That's traditionally what would happen in the event of somebody else buying your home is you have to get it built into the sale of the home. When you don't have the right people on your team making that happen from a realtor's perspective, it can be very difficult, and that's where you hear the horror stories.
And I can see a lot of people being like, well, I'm not trying to pay $60,000, $70,000 more for this home. And the realtor being like, yeah, let's just find a different home. But as more and more homes are adopting solar out of necessity, it's going to be more and more relevant and mandatory that these real estate agents and homeowners are aware of how to navigate with solar. So that's old solar. How does new solar work if I'm planning on moving in a couple years from now?
Yeah, it's super simple. It's a $200 transfer fee. You don't even have to get approved for credit. So the next person who moves in, let's say you got your system, you got your virtual power plant, you've been up and operational for 5 years. That means you still have 20 years worth of warranties left, bumper to bumper warranties. I don't think we've talked too much on the warranty side of it, but that'll be one of the questions that we get to. Bumper to bumper warranty over the course of a 25-year time period. Any maintenance, any repairs, anything that doesn't meet our energy needs and energy production requirements, you're going to be protected against that with this system, right? So let's say 5 years in, you decide it's time to go. The next homeowner still has 20 years and they inherit every single thing that you've gained with this system. They inherit the same exact benefits. The system itself, the batteries, the power, everything is completely taken care of, right? And all they're doing is taking that system and transferring it over to the new homeowner. Just like if they were going to be with traditional power bills and they were going to go with Encore and REPs, retail energy providers, they would do the same thing. They'd move into the home and they would get everything switched to their name and they would get everything uploaded. They make sure that everything's being delivered to their name. And now that would be the process if they were going to move into a home. It's no different. They're making it as seamless as possible. Business as usual, because this is the new way of doing things when it comes to power purchasing agreements and upgrading the grid. That's the new norm behind it. So a $200 transfer fee is what's happening in that case. And another thing that people usually ask tethered to that question is what happens if they were to like default or they weren't to do this or they weren't able to pay for the system or whatever the case may be. There's never any lien that's ever put on the home. You never have a lien put on the home with the new program. With old programs out there, when you were going in debt and you were taking on all that risk, there was liens that could be put on the home. The only thing that could ever happen is if you stopped paying your utility bill and you stopped paying for your solar system, you could have that repo. They could come and say, hey, I'm going to take it back. You're not paying for it. We're just going to take it back, right? But that would just be them taking it off your roof and back to business, right? You're not having, you're not, I lost my train of thought.
Could they shut it off? Could they just shut, if somebody didn't pay, could they just shut you out from having access to the solar?
No, they don't have the ability to do that.
Okay.
They don't have the ability to shut you out. They don't have the ability to shut you off, but they do have the ability to say, hey, we're going to come and take back the system. But there's no lien ever connected to it. That's one of the things people are worried about, a property lien. We can get a lien for taking the system. Not a lien. We can come and get the system.
I don't want to pay any money. I don't want to spend any money on this. I'm already spending money on my utility bill. I don't want to spend any money on solar.
Yeah. So with the old programs, people were told it's a bill swap. They've heard that terminology. People have heard bill swap, bill swap, bill swap, no upfront cost, no out-of-pocket cost. And then they sit down with a solar sales rep and there's a $40, $50, $60, $70, $80,000 loan tied to the project. That's what people are afraid of. They're like, I don't want to hear it. You're wasting my time. Anytime I can get people to sit down and have a conversation with me, this is completely different than anything they've ever seen before. They're like, this is not even close to what I thought it was, because they're tired of getting bait and switched when they hear the word bill swap. So when I say one of the biggest things that I need people to understand with this program is there is no loan. I've said this a couple times, but there's no loan, there's no debt, there's no risk tied to it in that capacity. You're not gonna get in there and sit down with me and all of a sudden I'm gonna pitch you on how much this system is gonna cost you and the amount of debt that you're gonna have tethered to this system. All you're doing in this scenario is I'm helping you do what you're already doing. I'm just gonna help you do it in a more effective manner. right? And what I mean by that is you're gonna spend that money for your utility bill anyway. I'm just gonna have you redirect that money. No out-of-pocket costs, no upfront money, no hidden fees. You're never paying for anything connected to this virtual power plant other than the power that your system produces. That's all you ever pay for. There is none of the other risk associated with the old solar programs. No upfront costs, no out-of-pocket costs, no loan, no debt, no hidden fees. There's never anything connected to this project that you will ever pay for with a virtual power plant tethered to the Freedom Forever platform. The only thing you ever pay for is the power that system produces, and we have a production guarantee.
So you're telling me no debt, which means no loan, no long-term financial commitments to it. This is doesn't
There is
sound
a
like
long-term financial commitment because it's a 25-year contract, 25-year power purchasing agreement. So you're agreeing to pay for that power for 25 years. The home owner in this home, whether it's you or the next homeowner, is going to pay for this power for the next 25
that the
years.
system produces.
So
Understood.
there is a long-term obligation to it, but you're going to pay for power no matter what.
Absolutely. So I get it. Okay. So I don't need to pay any money now. I'm not gonna have any debt, no loans. This just sounds too good to be true. Why? Like what there has to be a catch in here somewhere. How if I don't have to pay any money and you guys are gonna come and put solar on my roof, I know that it costs money to have a crew come out here and do that. How is this happening? It just sounds too good to be true.
You're absolutely correct. And the utility companies and the banks and everyone who's offering these programs are not going to be able to offer them forever. It comes back to our problem. If you don't understand the problem that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation as far as the supply and demand issue, that's the reason that this is available. Our demand for electricity is at an all-time high. And our problem is we don't have enough power that's being produced. The key to this whole thing is a virtual power plant is going to produce more power. It's also going to give us more places to store that power. The only reason that something like this is being offered is we have a problem that there's not enough power being produced. And we need twice as much electrical infrastructure as we currently have. So in order to expand the infrastructure, they have other things that are happening in the DFW area to produce more power. But one of the key things that they're driving home that benefits the homeowner the most is virtual power plants. And it's as simple as that is we just need more places that are producing their own power and harnessing the power of the sun. The whole goal behind it is sun goes up, bills go down. And you're now producing and having independence with your power. It's not anything more complicated than that. That is the reason that something like this exists. But right now, they need you, right? The utility companies need more people to go solar. The utility grid is old and outdated, and we have a massive need for power. Once they don't need you anymore, once they've started to catch up and they've started to replace enough of the infrastructure, programs like this will no longer exist because they don't need you. They found more effective and efficient ways to do the same thing. Right now, they're in a place where they need you, and when they need you, they're going to give you more benefit. But the only reason that they're giving you benefit, and this is a key thing, the number one objection I get is too good to be true. That's the number one concern that people have with this program because it's so much better than the old programs. But you got to remember a couple things. This program was designed with all of the old pain points of the old programs in mind, right? So it wasn't designed on accident. It was designed, okay, what are the biggest concerns that people have with this program? How can we build a bulletproof program where everybody wins? And so I want to walk through the win-win-win to help you understand it. The people who win the most out of this are the finance companies and the installers, right? That it's as simple as that. So the relationship is companies like Infin, Lightreach, Sonova, all of these companies. I'm not going to get into the politics of which one's better and this, that, and the other, but those finance companies, those lenders that are now inheriting all the risk of these projects, they are the ones who win big time by you allowing them access to your infrastructure. They already bought all this equipment. They're already paying for these projects to be done, and they want to do it in the cheapest manner possible. And it's cheaper for them to use your roof. That's one thing you got to understand. They're wanting access to your roof. And if you have a south and west facing roof, primarily that's what they want access to. And they're saying, hey, if you'll let us rent this sector of your roof, we're gonna produce this power anyway, whether it's in a field or whether it's on your roof. But we make way more money using roofs than building new infrastructure. They're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it for an ROI. And their ROI, their return on investment is much higher going directly to a homeowner and using existing infrastructure versus having to build brand new infrastructure. And when I say that, people don't quite understand it. You got it when you go and lease the land, you have to get the land ready to be able to install on it. So there's a lot of work that goes into that a lot of the times to make sure that it's ready.
Right.
You have to use ground mounts. You have to use trenching. There's so many other components that make that process so much more expensive than just leveraging a roof that's already there ready for you.
Understood.
Right? So that is one of the reasons why it's not too good to be true. The other reason it's not too good to be true is they're going to be your utility company for the next 25 years. They're going to make money on that payment just like your current utility provider for the next 25 years. It's the long game for these investors. They're making big dividends on that long term. The other side of why that makes sense for them is they get to leverage all of the tax benefits that are available to these programs as well. So they're making money in a lot of different manners leveraging this program. And it's a win for the utility companies because they're able to increase their supply. They're able to get more supply. They're able to have more homes producing power so that their grid's not so stressed out. And they need to relieve stress on the grid. And if you'll help them do that, they're saying, hey, we'll give you power at a discounted rate because that still benefits us more than having all this stress on the grid and us going farther in debt from all the repairs that have to happen because we're not repairing the grid. This is part of the repair maintenance, so they're going to give you a better deal. And then ultimately, you getting a deal for cheaper power is better for them than any of the other scenarios. So again, this is not out of the kindness of your heart. This is because you have a really good roof that is a perfect fit for a virtual power plant. So them giving you a good benefit on these things is better than the alternative for them. So they benefit greatly. The utility and these lenders and these installers benefit greatly from these programs. That's why these programs exist.
Man, I think that covers all of the frequently asked questions I had. Do you have any more that you wanted to hit on?
So when people ask, does the bill stay the same? If you have the bill stays the same with a power purchasing agreement, it stays the same for the first year, but you're now predicting your inflation rather than being at the expense. It's insurance with your inflation. Again, we can all agree that power is going to go up more than 2.99% on a yearly basis. Just look at the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Just look at the trajectory of what's happening across the United States. Power is going to go up at a more rapid rate than 2.99%. Right? That means, just to put that in perspective, if you're on a 2.99% increase yearly, that means over the course of 25 years during your power purchasing agreement, your bill will double. And that might scare some people, but I'm way more scared about the supply and demand issue that we have right now that's going to cause my bill to double in the next 4 to 5 years. And that's not ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you stick with the utility grid in the next 3, 4, 5 years, your bills are going to double and triple. And it's because of the needs that we have. They're going to use your money to pay for all the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. They need that to happen. They can't build all this extra infrastructure without increasing people's utility bills. So these bills are going to go up at a rapid rate. This is helping you to hedge against that at a more predictable fashion. Right? So you as a homeowner, you get to benefit dramatically from having a bill that goes up little by little, and you know exactly what you're paying every single year for the next 25 years. It's a better version of a retail energy provider. We pick a retail energy provider for 2 to 3 to 4 years at a time. Some people switch every year looking for the next best thing. This is the greatest energy provider that you could have, and you now have a locked-in REP for the next 25 years, and you never have to worry about it changing on you, and you have production guarantees for the next 25 years while having the security of backup storage on site with your power.
Makes sense.
So that's always something that comes up. What happens at the end of the contract is another frequently asked question that I get a lot. Is at the end of the contract, you're left with 3 options. You can personally get it scoped out by someone who's going to tell you the value of the system at fair marketplace value. You can have a third-party person come in and tell you the fair marketplace value of a system 25 years from now and then buy out the rest of the system. You can extend it for another 5 years, or you can ask us to come and get it, right? But either way, you have autonomy at the end of the 25 years. If 25 years from now you decide you want to get a new REP and you'd rather change it up, you can say, hey, just come and get it, take it off my roof, I'm done. But you do have options at the end. If we sell the house, $200 transfer fee, and I like to talk on this because the next question that follows that, if we sell, is what if the next homeowners don't want it? Right. And I think that's really important because What I've learned, to be honest, there are 5% of people that are old school, that are just stuck in their ways. They're going to do things the way they do them, and they don't want nothing to do with no solar, no matter how much we talk to them. And they're nice people. We've had great conversations with them, but some people are just not going to change that facet. No matter how much the bill goes up, it's just a principle thing at this point for those individuals. So 5% of people aren't going to want your home because it has solar. Simple as that. There's going to be 5% that are like, nope, no good. But that's no different than someone not wanting your home because you don't have enough bedrooms, you don't have enough bathrooms, you have a pool, you don't have a pool, just like any other thing
Right,
that's connected
right.
to a house, right? 5% of people are going to want your house currently because it has solar. And then the other 90% of people don't really care as long as it makes financial sense. That's all they care about. If you can show them and you help and you can show them 5 years from now what they would have been paying versus what they are paying, they're just excited that they have a better benefit and they can get that benefit that you help them get.
Makes
So
sense.
you're always going to have that concern, but most people are just going to care about the final brass tacks at the end of the day. As far as the reviews go, we kind of briefly touched on that, but I want to kind of come back to it because people are always like, well, what's going on with the reviews? You got to look at the reviews since we've adopted the virtual power plant program and the power purchasing agreements versus the loan-based systems. You also have to look at when we brought everything in-house and now are vertically integrated versus we could have any Tom, Dick, and Harry selling through us, right? Literally anybody who wanted access to the platform could sell, and we had no control over what the salespeople were actually saying, what they were promising, what their consequences would be if they weren't doing the right things. That was all based on the sales organization. Now we have complete control from A to Z. From the first time we contact a client until solar is installed on their roof, there's no fillers in between, and that's relatively new. But if you look at our reviews and how much we've improved in the last 12 to 18 to 24 months, you'll see it's like a brand new company compared to what they were saying 2 years ago versus what they're saying today. But you got to take time to look and compare the two different things. And it's because they got tired of their reputation being tarnished by salespeople who were doing it with the wrong expectations.
Makes sense.
So that's one of the big things. Um, Another thing is what happens when we need to replace the roof.
Mm.
When you need to replace the roof, there's one thing it does need to be added to your homeowner's insurance. People, another thing that people don't do, and that ends up creating a bad rep, is all of a sudden once they've already had the system installed, then they tell their homeowner's insurance that they're going solar. That's not how it works. If you're going to add that to your roof, they need to know about that because they insure your roof. If they don't know about it, then they're going to be mad when they see something that they're insuring that's been added to it, right? It doesn't usually change anything other than like $5 to $10 on average. As it increases your homeowner's insurance about 5 to 10. The most I've ever seen is $20 to add solar and get it insured, and now it just becomes one with your roof, right? And in the event of a storm or hail or anything like that, when you go to replace your roof, you're not going to have to replace the system. You're in roofing. You've seen that.
Yep.
You don't ever usually have to replace the system, maybe a panel here and there. But ultimately, it's a detached reset that's built into the quote. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit more.
If you go solar and you need to get your roof done, what'll happen most likely is that your solar system is going to protect your roof for one. You need softball size hail at least to cause damage to the solar panels. So if we have that, we've got bigger problems, right? But when it does need to be replaced, what'll happen is we'll detach the solar. That's typically day one. And we have different crews that specialize in detach and reset. Depending on how the homeowner has their power purchasing agreement set up, and their deal with their solar company, it may involve calling out the company that installed that solar, or we can bring in one of our crews to do it. But the insurance company, if you've notified them properly, they will give a line item for the detach and reset. So we just take the solar off, store it safely, do your roof, take it off, put it back on, and then we give the roof a few days to rest, and then we reset the solar, and it's like nothing ever happened. So that's the process right there.
And that's now built into your roof. It's part of your policy. It comes along just like your fence or your windows or anything else that's a part of that quote. Solar is just bundled into that. And generally, again, you're not replacing it. You're just taking it off and putting it back on.
Yep. And we do, depending on what company that resets your solar, some companies are a lot more thorough and are going to replace different components on there, like the mounts and some of the brackets and things like that. But your panels are going to be the same panels that we took off that we put back on.
This is not a loan. I'm going to say that very clearly. This is not a loan. You're not going in debt at all. For the millionth time, I just want to make sure I make that clear because it's very easy to confuse it with other things. And this actually does not even impact anyone's credit. Any homeowner that gets approved for this process, it's just like a phone bill or any traditional utility bill. The only time you would ever see this on your credit is if you were to not pay your bills. If you were to default on the program, then it shows up on your credit. But other than that, there is no punishment or no credit dings or anything like that. There's no DTI because you're not in debt for anything, right? You can look this stuff up. I just want to make sure that people understand that. Again, I'm just going to run through these supply and demand issues real quick. What's causing a high demand for electricity is population increase, data centers, electric vehicles, and AI. The solution for that to help us produce more power to counteract all of those things that I just discussed is virtual power plants to produce all of your own energy on site and to store all of that energy on site. What we're proposing is a bill swap program with no loan, no debt, no bank fees, no upfront costs, no out-of-pocket cost, no liability of the system, hedging against inflation. You never have to worry about your bill going up on you more than a predictable rate. We're proposing you allow us access to your roof. You rent a piece of your roof to us. We already bought the system. We own the system. We'll warranty the system bumper to bumper. We pay for all the upfront money. We pay for the loan. We pay for, because we're still working with the lenders, we pay for all of it. We pay for the permits. We pay for the engineering. We pay for everything all the way through the process. We assume all of the liability bumper to bumper. You don't have to worry about none of that. That is something that with this bill swap program, you're just redirecting to a virtual power plant agreement versus a traditional utility bill.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think we're sitting here at the kitchen table, which is where most of these conversations happen. And I think that if somebody's considering going solar after watching this, if you're a solar sales rep and you want to have more clarity on the new programs that are out there in Texas, batteries are the solution. Honestly, across the country, batteries are the solution. Going solar takes that stress off the grid. Just to kind of give this a whole conversation recap. Why does this even matter? The grid is over 130 years old. The demand on the grid has grown, right?
And
Why?
it's continuing.
And it's continuing to grow because of data centers, AI, EVs. People use more population, people use more energy. How do we fix this problem? Well, we either have to build new infrastructure or leverage existing infrastructure. A virtual power plant allows you to produce, store, and distribute the power that you need all on site. That site being your home. So now you make the decision, how do you want to go solar? Do you want to finance and go with old solar and assume all the liability? Or do you go with the virtual power plant agreement where all you are liable to do is pay for the power that your system produces, that you consume, and you have these finance companies and these solar installers that will take on all the risk of making sure your system is performing. If a panel is not functioning properly, they come out and fix that. They put a 25-year warranty on the batteries. So you either pay your current utility provider, which is making electricity via fossil fuels, or you switch to a renewable energy power purchasing agreement where you produce that power on site. Did I sum that up good?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So hopefully this information was helpful if you're a homeowner or if you work in the solar industry. My name is Javon Wheeler.
Dylan Olson.
And we are with Solar Pros and our installers Freedom Forever. And we're looking to help homeowners go solar one door at a time.